Mm.
I'm your host, Tommy Ashley. Listen to the Inside Carolina podcast, sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt, johnnytshirt.com, your place to get all your Carolina gear. I'll talk about them a little bit later in the show. Before we get started, I want you to take a moment to rate us and review us on iTunes or Spotify or however you get your audio podcast, and also take a moment to subscribe to the YouTube link below if you're listening to us or watching us on that medium. Carolina 26, Boston College 22. The day after podcast it is. Buck Sanders and Jason Staples have joined me. Buck, I'll start with you first. Mack Brown said a win is a win, or something to that effect, and certainly going up to Boston College and getting a win is always a good day. Your overall thoughts on what you saw on Saturday?
Well, the main thing you talked about and the thing that Mac talked about is they got the win. And for the first time ever in their history, they opened the season with back to back ACC wins. So that's not nothing. Um, the game was very uncomfortable to watch. If you're a UNC fan, it got a little too close for comfort, particularly there at the end. Um, and from that reason, I think a lot of people are upset, disappointed, don't feel great about it. But it was, had it gone the other direction and UNC came from behind to win 26-22, would have been a totally different feeling about it, I think. I think the offense still needs to uh, take the advice of Mack Brown, which is to um, take what the defense gives you. I don't think enough of that was going on. And I thought the defense played reasonably well. I'm a little concerned about some of the injuries on that side of the ball now after the game. Um, but all in all, a win is a win.
Absolutely. Jason, uh, Buck referenced Mack Brown, take what the defense gives you. We talked after the Syracuse game, and we talked the last couple of weeks about Sam Howell needing to take more of the free stuff. Uh, he's getting better at it, I guess. The numbers, the stats, the yards per play and yards per attempt and all that bear out some things. But it looked to me on more than one occasion Saturday against Boston College, he was looking for the big shot when maybe something underneath was available. Your thoughts on his progression over the first 2 weeks?
Well, this is something we talked about in the Inside Carolina preview. It's something that I mentioned in the uh, scouting reports prior to the season that this was going to be the big challenge for Howell coming into this year. Is that every team that was gonna face him this year, it was going to be different from last year. Last year, you got to remember Howell was a true freshman, so teams first of all came in, especially early in the year, came in with no film on him in terms of in a college system and no real sense of we're going to come into this game trying to stop Sam Howell. He was not the guy that teams were scheming for last year. And they're trying to take away the running game. They're trying to let's make Sam Howell beat us. Well, Howell did that a few times. Had some success. But this year teams are coming in saying, "All right, now we're going to try to take what Howell does away and we're going to force them to beat us other ways." It's a different thing for him now. And every defensive coordinator in America, at least every good one, is going to have the philosophy of you've got to make the opposing team beat you left-handed. So to metaphorize from basketball, you hear defensive coordinators say this all the time. We got to make them beat us left-handed. So if you're playing against a really good right-handed offensive player in basketball, you want to force him left. And if he beats you left and can hit that shot going left, can beat you down the lane going left, then you tip your cap and you say, that guy's pretty good. But you can't give him the stuff that he likes. And that was the thing that going through Howell's stuff from last year, I noticed it. And I know that every defensive coordinator who broke him down, and they're going to spend all off season scheming for him, those guys spent their off seasons watching what Howell did last year. And he had really the bulk of his success around basically 3 throws. And so you take those throws away and you say, all right, now beat us with something else. Let's see if you're patient enough to take that. And those 3 throws, and you really can almost combine them down to 2, but those 3 throws were basically the vertical down the outside the numbers. So either a takeoff or a fade, and especially that slot fade to Daz Newsome. They made a lot of hay on that stuff, and teams would single cover them and give them a chance to win over the top, and basically say, all right, you're going to have to beat us over the top. Well, they had a lot of success with that. And he throws a great deep ball. So that was a lot of his success last year. And especially if you look at some of the success, even going back to the South Carolina game in the fourth quarter, what did they win that game on? They won on a few deep shots. Basically, the one that sticks out most to me is the Newsome slot fade on that long third down that then they converted into a touchdown. And then the same thing, De'Ami Brown's catch for a touchdown. You had Bo Corrales' catch for a touchdown in that game. All of those on the same route. And then you look at the other success, and it was on the corner route, or they oftentimes run the corner more. It looks more like an out because they roll it a good bit. But he had a lot of success throwing the corner route. And so you could also toss in some out concepts there. That would be the third thing. But what this means is that most of his success last year came on the outside part of the field, outside the numbers, and especially down the field. Well, teams are taking that away now. They're saying, okay, well, you know what? he showed us he can really, really throw those well. So we're gonna go ahead and take that stuff away. We're gonna drop our guys and make sure that we're playing over the top. We're gonna hedge these receivers, and we're gonna force them to make plays with not over the top, below the top. We're gonna force them. We're gonna put a ceiling on them. We're gonna see if they can execute between the hashes and in the intermediate area. We're gonna force him to play like an experienced quarterback in that regard. And there has been some development there. I mean, he's made some throws. I mean, let's be honest. The play where he almost crossed the line of scrimmage, first of all, to slow himself down, be aware of where the line of scrimmage was, and then secondly, to make that throw to Javonte Williams, and which turned into a touchdown. That's right between the hashes and a broken play. That's a veteran play. That's a really, really good play. But it does take more execution. It takes more patience, and he's still developing there. I mean, he's a gunslinger at heart, and I think we're still seeing the growth of Sam Howell here as he's for the first time facing college defenses that are really set up to try to take away what he's most comfortable with and what he's most accustomed to doing, what he's wired to do. So now he's going to have to develop that left hand and show that he can win going to the basket with that.
But one thing he did is he ran the ball, and then you take away that bad fumble and the ball gets kicked, and Javonte Williams makes just an unbelievable hustle play to get that ball back. Aside from that, Howell was very effective, had 49 yards rushing, of course, -1 after you count in that sack and then the rest. But I thought he looked good. He looked Temple type good, Military Bowl type good, running the ball against Boston College defense, who I said in the pregame show that Marcus Valdez could play, the linebacker could play, and they were effective getting Howell on the move. I hate to venture here already this early in the season, but a lot of people have talked about Phil Longo's play calling. My question to you is, how much of it, the inconsistency is play calling issues, which I have an opinion on that, versus the decision making maybe that Howell has made in games, and to Jason's point, the growth that Howell needs to make that play calling not so objectionable for so many fans.
Well, I think you have to keep in mind, Tommy, that the air raid offense is an offense that's predicated on going long. Philosophically, Phil Longo is just not wired to be a take what they give you kind of offensive coordinator. He's just not wired that way. If you look at just the garden variety descriptions of the air raid offense, you're going to see a lot of people talking about their first down play is go long, their second down play is go long, their third down play is go long. So I think it's certainly probably philosophically it cuts against Longo's grain a bit to dial back the desire and tendency and uh, the whole predicate of your offense, dial that back from the long pass into a more of a, well, the underneath stuff is available. Let's go there. And then when they come up to protect against that, then we'll go long. And, a lot of air raid coaches are successful uh, in terms of just throwing the long ball and just never adjust. But I think Mack Brown is going to call him into his office and have more conversations with him about, hey, maybe we should dial back the tendency to try to go deep on every play and throw more underneath stuff. I think they'll have that conversation.
Jason, do you agree with that? And also, I didn't see a ton of separation. Now, I say that with the caveat of the the video productions of football games early in the season has been horrific. I would like
Hashtag show the safeties.
I would like to
Sign the
think that,
petition.
I would like to think that it's COVID related, but it's really been an issue for a long time. But your thoughts on Buck's point there, as far as maybe Longo adjusting. Longo has to adjust as much as Sam Howell does, as much as the receivers do, as everybody else does. How does a coach adjust or make those adjustments when, like Buck says, it's in his nature to go deep?
Well, I mean, I think there are a couple things here. One is, yes, four verts is one of the core concepts that every air raid team reps the heck out of. So, and that's, four guys going vertical on a release. So, that's core to what Longo does, but that doesn't necessarily mean go long. So that's the thing. You have to be able to adjust in those concepts. You don't have to throw four verts over the top. A lot of teams will coach four verts to be primarily back shoulder throws. And that's something that I think Carolina needs to rep a good bit right now, because teams are going to play over the top of those receivers, and they're going to continue to force them into into throws that are not over the top. And the more that you can rep those back shoulder throws and be ready for that, the better. So that's number one, is just do the same things that you're doing in terms of the calls, but you can execute it. Excuse me. I was fighting that sneeze for about 2 minutes. So do the same things that you're doing, but you can execute them differently. And that's the main thing on that. Now, there's also a lot of concepts in the air raid that are short concepts. I mean, you run the snag, you run smash, you run mesh. They ran mesh quite a bit in this game, but Boston College did a really good job of picking it up most of the time. But you're running mesh, and the design of that is either to hit one of those shallow crossers. You got two shallow crossers at about 5 yards right in front of the quarterback that mesh, that run right past each other, usually clap hands, just to show that they're real close to each other, and they're forcing the coverage to pass each other off. And then if the linebackers jump those routes, then you're trying to hit a dig route right behind them, a little square in. So these are the sorts of things that are core to the air raid as well. And it's the stuff that they did call a good bit of. But first of all, as a quarterback, you've got to see it well, and you got to have the confidence to make that throw to the guy that you have. And there has to be separation. Now, the problem is, like you said, Tommy, none of us right now have a whole lot of angles to be able to see what's going on downfield all the time. And I'm going to need to get to the next home game in person just to be able to see what's going on downfield, because frankly, with the camera angles, we're flying blind a good bit of the time, unless there's some replay that shows us. But it does give me the impression right now that Howell's not super confident in everything he's seeing. And they've done a good job with him of making sure to get him to throw the ball that you're confident in. Don't turn it over. Make sure that you're protecting the football. And he's still doing that. And that's the thing. I mean, I look at the Boston College game here, and when I look at the stats, the things that I'm looking at first in any football game is, okay, what do I see in turnovers? And you know what? There's still we can say a lot of things about Howell, but how many interceptions did he have on Saturday? How many times do we see him fumble? Still protecting the football, and if you protect the football, you're gonna win a lot of football games. And so that's the other thing is he's still getting used to being able to make these decisions and throw some of these secondary reads, throw these other concepts well without turning it over, without putting the ball in danger. And I think that's really where they're at right now.
Buck, sticking on the offensive side of the ball for a little bit, I said, I think it was on the Inside Carolina Live show on Saturday in the pregame. I'm not so sure Michael Carter's not the offensive MVP of this team. He continues to do everything except get those fantasy point touchdowns, as Ross Martin pointed out on Twitter. But, between Javonte and Carter, you've got 6 point whatever yards a carry. Carter, of course, 7.6 yesterday. I mean, this running game, I think that is where some of the frustration comes from the fan base and people watching, is they are so effective on the ground when they're able to commit to it that they have, it's why throw it. I understand why, but speak to Carter and Javonte's performance in the first 2 games of the season, because, again, I do think Boston College and Syracuse at least had pretty solid defensive lines.
The thing that people need to understand is that it's not as though North Carolina isn't running the ball. In terms of total offense, the looking at it, they have run the ball much more often than they've thrown it. They have 74 in 2 games, 74 rushing attempts. And let me look real quick. I hope I'm right about this because I'm talking off the top of my head here. And North Carolina has 61 passing attempts. So it's not as though they're not leveraging, the running game at North Carolina. And, the other thing to keep in mind is we're not talking about a team that, the wheels have fallen off of in terms of offense. There's still in total offense, yards per play, they're 4th in the conference. They're averaging 6.4 yards per play and 432 yards per game. So, it's not as though none of that underneath stuff that Jason was talking about, it isn't happening. They are going underneath, and he's still averaging 8.7 yards per attempt. So, even though they've taken away the deep ball, there's no point on trying to unbalance the offense by skewing much more heavily to the run game than to the passing game. So, I think this is something that they're going to have to adjust to as the season goes on. But at the same time, at least what we're getting from the numbers is that, the passing offense is still working. You're just not seeing those deep shots. You're not seeing Diami or Daz catching the ball in the end zone, with one hand falling out of the end zone. You're not seeing those plays, but that doesn't mean that North Carolina's passing offense is a liability at this point. They're still, doing well in that area. They're just not seeing those splash plays, to wide receivers of 50 or so yards. So, run the ball, I think is, and getting frustrated that they don't run the ball more. I'll at least say that they've learned how to hand the ball to Javonte Williams around the goal line. So that's one place to start. they figured that piece out.
Yeah, they certainly have been effective there. Javonte around the goal line is pretty much cash money for North Carolina, and they're running that effectively. Jason, right quick before we go to break, offensive line. Jordan Tucker, if he's hurt, that could be a problem. But speak to what you saw from the line against Boston College. Obviously, the rushing stats speak for themselves. The protections, Howell was under some immediate pressure pretty often in this ball game. What'd you see from the OL?
I think that it was a little up and down. Again, as you said, the rushing stats kind of speak for themselves. 4.5 yards a rush, not bad, not great. I thought that early on they struggled. They struggled just like they had against Syracuse to pick up a few stunts and twists and all that, and get some things right. It still looks to me like you've got some talented bodies up front, but they are not all working exactly as you'd like as a unit. And that's something that some of it's probably from all of the up and down in terms of COVID-19 and injuries and all of those things. Some of it's probably from 3 weeks between games. And we talked about on the preview on the game plan podcast that after 3 weeks off, the one place where you're probably going to see the biggest difference is on the line of scrimmage. The offensive line does need live reps to really be able to gel together as a group. You've got to be able to actually block a real rush. You've got to block guys going 100 miles an hour in the run game to get used to doing it with the guy next to you. And there's no substitute for that kind of thing. Even in practice. So, and when you're not scrimmaging a bunch during the season, if you're not playing games, you're not getting that. So I think some of that is the price of that. I also think that the left side right now is young, and basically from left tackle to center, there's still they're still working out the kinks in terms of communication, in terms of youth, in terms of recognizing pressure from the second level. There's just still a lot of things to clean up. I still think that there's a lot of talent on that offensive line, and when they get their hands on you, and when they know where they're supposed to be, and they're communicating well, they're winning those battles. But it's just still a good bit to clean up. You got to remember, they're still a young group, and then once Tucker went out as well, I think that made some difference in this game as well. So, but I thought all in all they played well. And a lot of the pressure that Howell got was because he was late in making decisions. He held on to the ball a good bit in this game. So, and he had time to hold on to the ball. So, I mean, it was a mixed bag. I think as with most situations, the offensive line is going to get more blame from fans than typical, than they deserve, or that they are typically going to get more blame from fans than they deserve, just because that's just when you see pressure on the quarterback, or when you see a guy get hit in the backfield, the immediate assumption is, oh, that's the offensive line's fault. He also had a couple misses from backs and protection in this one. I know Javonte had one pretty bad miss and pass protection in the end zone that is what caused actually there was one interception, wasn't there? I was looking at the
Yeah, it was that tip mess down there around the goal line.
Yeah, and when I said that earlier, I wasn't thinking about that one, but that's not on the quarterback, so that's why I didn't count it. And I was also looking at the stats and didn't see it, but yeah, that's what caused that interception. Is that was on the back, not on the offensive line. So you kind of have to look at the whole picture. I think overall the offensive line played reasonably well, especially for a second game, especially for 3 weeks off, and especially for not having the best offensive lineman on the team out there. So, I think a little bit mixed, but more positive than negative in this game.
Indeed. Take a short break, talk about Johnny T-Shirt, johnnytshirt.com. Great sponsors of the podcast, great friends of Inside Carolina, and great friends of Inside Carolina premium subscribers. If you're one of those, you get 10% off your order on top of all the sales and all the offers and deals they have throughout the year, especially around the holidays coming up. You can get jerseys, shirts, anything you want clothing-wise, for anybody in your family. You can also get any tailgate supply. One day we will tailgate again. Things for your home, things for your car, whatever you need from Johnny T-Shirt and johnnytshirt.com. Great friends, like I said, and great friends of the premium subscribers. You subscribe, 10% off. And the thing about that 10% off is it's on top of whatever sale they have. So if they have a 30% sale and you got 10% extra, that's 40% off. You can't beat it. Go to Johnny T-Shirt on Franklin Street. Go see them. They'll bring it out to the curb for you, or go shop with them online. They'll bring it straight to your door. Jason Staples obviously loves some Johnny T-Shirt and JohnnyT-Shirt.com. Take another short break. Let the national guys pay the bills. We'll be right back. We're back. It's the game. Oh, excuse me. It's the day after podcast. Been that type of week so far, folks. The day after podcast, Buck Sanders and Jason Staples are with me. I'm going to switch up the order. Buck, I've always started with you, but I'm going to start with Jason on this go round. Phil Jerkovic, 6'5", 230, maybe, probably more than that. He played a well of a game against North Carolina, but let's talk about on North Carolina's end, the pressure that they got on him, and then the ability to get him on the ground. I thought that was a key going into the ball game, is if you get pressure on him, you got to get him off his feet. Jerkovic certainly found a way to make some plays in his 56 passes, made them all except the last one. How did Carolina fare dealing with that guy?
What pressure?
What?
That was one of my criticisms coming out of this game, is that I'm looking at the numbers right now on Pro Football Focus, and they did get 29 pressures on him, right, out of those 56 passes. So basically, one out of every two dropbacks. They got some pressure.
Is that not good enough?
Here's what concerns me. Here's where the pressures came from. 9 pressures from Chaz Surratt, 4 from Tamon Fox, 4 from Jeremiah Gemmel, 4 from Hopper, 3 from Bohasic, 2 from Storm Duck. Then you're starting to get down into nothing else after that. What's most concerning to me is when they needed pressure, they got it mostly from the second level. And that's been my concern coming into the year for this team. And I think it's an even bigger concern now. And especially, I mean, I don't know how I know Bohasic went out in this game, but depending on his status, that's a concern, because they were not able to get pressure consistently without bringing a backer, and without bringing either Gemmel or Surratt. They were not getting pressure on him. I mean, you take out those. You look at how many hits did they get on him. Surratt got 5 hits on him. Des Evans got 1. Bohasic got 1, and Gemmel got 1. That's it. Right. So 5 of those hits came from Chaz Surratt. And look, Surratt's a really good player. So, you know what you got with him in terms of a rusher, in terms of all that. But if you're depending on that one guy to be your pressure guy, and then what that means is you can't use him in coverage. You can't use him in some of the other ways that you're depending on him to be a player. So that's the concern to me, is that they were not able to get pressure with their base front without bringing one of those backers. And so, and I think that is one of the reasons why Boston College had success throwing the football, is because they knew that when they were getting pressure, they knew that there was something there to be had in the second level, particularly in that middle area. And they took advantage of some of that. That's when they would hit the tight end. That's when they would do some of those different things that got them some key first downs. You got to be able to generate rush. You got to be able to generate pressure without bringing a backer. And right now, Carolina has a long way to go there.
Buck, Jason's point right there is something we talked about in the game plan podcast, is how do you utilize Chaz Surratt? Do you utilize him to cover Hunter Long, the tight end? But if you do that, you don't get the pressure you can get from him rushing the quarterback. And I don't think Carolina ever figured that out, because Hunter Long was just fantastic. I mean, he's the best player on the field at times. But Carolina, that dilemma that Jason talks about, that's something that Carolina's got to figure out. The question is, how do you figure it out with the talent that they have out there? I thought Des Evans, I don't know, he looked a little slow to me, like he didn't quite know what he was supposed to be doing. He made an effect, or he made some commotion on a couple plays, but he didn't look as aggressive as he's going to need to be. Miles Murphy was out there. He had some moments, but we know what they've got upperclassmen wise. So how does Jay Bateman work that in, and not just have Chaz. You only have one Chaz Surratt. Well, how do you use him if you're not going to be able to get pressure any other way?
The thing that I keep thinking about, and it was part of my morning after column today, is that you can see, I think, you talked about Des and Murphy, and both of those guys scratched on the stat sheet by getting a quarterback hurry. But you can see in them their potential to be a disruptor. We haven't seen some other guys like Clyde Pender or KBJ. We haven't seen some of the other people that are on the sidelines now because they're nursing some kind of injury. But you can see that there's potential there for North Carolina to that defensive line OLB layer of defense to improve. And what those guys primarily lack, Jason was talking about how live reps affect the offensive line. I think live reps also affect the defensive line and that outside linebacker position. You got to get used to the level of contact you're going to get from offensive linemen firing off. You got to get used to diagnosing different protections and how to defeat those. And the only way you can really do that, I think, is in games. So I think it's coming. And I think probably the goal in the back of Jay Bateman's mind is as we get to the, seventh, eighth, ninth games of the season, that people other than Chaz Surratt are going to be getting hits on quarterbacks and making those kinds of plays and doing those sorts of things. And there's also another option, which is to bring in Eugene Asante inside and let Chaz go to an outside linebacker spot. You're still counting on Surratt to get to the quarterback, but that gives you another option of how to do it. So I think the defense is coming along. I think the defense is going to, by the end of this season, be a much better defense than what you're seeing right now, I believe. As these younger kids get more reps, get more instruction, get a little bigger and stronger in the weight room, those things are on the come. So we'll just see how fast they can get here and when some of these other players might be available, like Pender and KBJ and some other guys.
Yeah, not having guys out there puts a lot of stress on a guy like Chaz Surratt having to play, 80, 81 snaps a game. We talked about that all last season about how that's not ideal. Jason, talk about the play of Trey Morrison. One of my concerns was moving him back to safety. I understand the need, but he's little. I mean, he's a small guy. He came up huge for North Carolina on Saturday. What'd you see from the young fella that eases your mind on any of those the defensive backfield issues that could happen and are going to happen with injuries? I mean, a guy like Morrison can do it all back there.
Yeah, I was really pleased with what I saw from him. Before that, I do want to get one other thing out there too, is with Eugene Asante not playing in this game. I think that was a big factor in terms of what limits you and how you can use Chaz Surratt, because Asante, his skill set to be able to be a coverage backer gives you more flexibility with when you put both of those guys on the field at the same time. So that's worth noting. But as far as Trey Morrison goes, he was better than I thought he would be, and I like Trey Morrison a lot. I think he's a good player. He looked really comfortable back there at safety. The one thing that if you're worried about his size, the one play that'll sort of solve that problem for you is he came up and laid the wood on that outstanding tight end. And I can tell you right now that the tight end's name is escaping me right now, but that tight end is going to be waking up tomorrow, or waking up today, I guess, and tomorrow for a few days, he's going to be feeling that. And that's going to impact the way he breathes for a week or two, because Morrison put the lumber to that midsection. And if you had any doubts about how physical he'd be, he was there. And obviously the game clinching 2-point conversion, interception, and return, he was all over the place in terms of recognizing. One of the best aspects of him is his football IQ, and you can see him back there. You can see his ability to get into passing lanes and be disruptive and get downhill quickly when he recognizes something underneath. So valuable player there. It's still not not the ideal, because what you'd really like is for him and Woolfolk to both be on the field together, but with Woolfolk out, that's that. So that's the unfortunate part, but I don't think there was a drop off there. The drop off is really at the nickel spot, where they're young and they're having to learn how to compensate for Morrison's absence there. But I thought he really played well at that nickel spot. I do think that there's some concern. I don't know what Storm Duck's injury was, but it did not. I'm a little concerned based on his reaction when they were squeezing that foot. If he's out for any length of time, he and Surratt have been the two best defensive players, and that would be a huge loss at corner, especially with Renee clearly not 100%. The secondary all of a sudden goes from a major strength to having some question marks, and that's the real concern at this stage of the season.
It is. That's concerning. Conley got dinged up as well. I mean, injuries are going to happen, but it's amazing to me how Carolina manages to suffer injuries in one position. I mean, one position gets decimated, but we'll see how that shakes out later in the week. Buck, a win is a win for North Carolina, goes to 2-0 in the conference. So let's look across the league a little bit. I thought a big game for North Carolina that they didn't play in was the State and Pittsburgh game, and we talked about it a little bit off the air. I thought State looked pretty good, but Pittsburgh losing, anytime you're in a league race and a team you do not play loses, is a good thing, even if the Wolfpack is the beneficiary of that win. What'd you see across the ACC with that game, Buck, and other games that maybe made you think Carolina's got a real shot to get in that top two or not?
The NC State game that you mentioned, yeah, it's kind of a double-edged sword there. I like you, it's good for a conference team that you're not going to play to get a loss. And a bonus feature of that is I'm really sick of hearing Packer and Durham talk about Pittsburgh and how great they are. And, so that will put a damper on some of that conversation for the coming week. I was a little surprised that Duke put 31 points on Virginia Tech and made a game out of that to some extent. They were helped in that regard because Virginia Tech turned the ball over 3 times, and you can't always expect that to happen. The Clemson Virginia game surprised me a little bit, even though Clemson beat them 41-23, I think. They didn't cover the spread against Virginia. I think Clemson was like a 28-point favorite or something like that. So I think Virginia showed a little bit more in that game, certainly, than they did in the ACC championship when they got beaten, 62-17. So that was a little surprising. I expected that margin to be a little bit bigger on Clemson's side. I didn't expect the closeness of the Duke and Virginia game, but I don't hate the messenger here, but I was really impressed with how NC State played against Pittsburgh. They weren't intimidated. Pittsburgh has got a reputation for being extremely nasty on the front and just chippy overall. And State didn't back down. I mean, they took it to Pitt that entire game. So that's kind of my overview. Have I missed a game that
Nothing relevant. There was a lot of teams off in the conference.
Yeah, there was only a few games, so I think I probably covered
You missed Florida State there. They came out with that huge win against FCS Jacksonville State. So they tried to take the week
they
off. It
had me
looked like at
worried
first.
about that. They had me worried about that for till about the fourth quarter.
Yeah, they tried to take a week
so-
off, but that was probably a bad idea.
Yeah. I want to circle back for a moment to Trey Morrison.
Okay.
Before you move on, Tommy. And Tommy will probably say amen to this, but the hardest hitting UNC safety I've ever seen on the field was Bracy Walker.
Novocaine.
And yeah, and when he hit people, you could hear it up in the cheap seats where Tommy and I sit. And he was 5'11" and $185. So, I think sometimes, of course, you got to have the physical ability and wherewithal to do it, but sometimes how hard you hit people depends on your want to. Sort of like rebounding in basketball is kind of a want to thing, and Morrison obviously has that want to.
He does. The one fear or concern maybe is to be able to hold up to the 1-2. You get small guys that like to lay the wood. They end up usually hurting themselves. But we'll see. Morrison played a fantastic game against Boston College, and a lot of people fretted that Hunter Long, the tight end for Boston College, had such a big day. That guy's going to have a big day quite a few times.
A lot of people.
And he's going to make a lot of money on the next level, I'd wager. Just a great player, as will the Boston College quarterback. Jason, you got anything else to close us out? I tried to avoid mentioning Florida State, but yeah.
Listen, I'm in no mood for mercy here, so yeah. I don't really have a whole lot left to add. I mean, I think that this was a solid win on the road, and the road games still it's still harder to play on the road even when there's no crowd there. People forget that it's not always just the crowd. It's that you're in a different stadium, you're playing away from home, you had to travel. There's all these other things that impact winning on the road. Any road win's a good win. This one did, I think, reveal some warts on this team that they're going to have to continue to get better. There's some places where you can still see some gaps that need to be fixed, but there's room for growth, and there's players on this roster that, especially some of those young guys, that as they get better, can continue to improve this team. This team is nowhere near its peak, and can get a lot better than this. The final thing is, when I look at the average yards per play in this game, Carolina was at 6.2 and Boston College was at 4.7. Normally, with that big of a gap in terms of yards per play, those are both good numbers. With that big of a gap, you're going to expect to win by about 14. So this game was closer, I think, than the actual play on the field suggested. Maybe it might be, and I think that tipped interception was a big factor in that gap, and that not being quite as big a gap as it could have been. But I thought North Carolina played a little better in this game than the actual score gap was. Good to get a close win out, good to go ahead and get a win on the road. And I think there's a lot of positives that you can take from this, more so than negatives.
Yeah. And the bottom line is 2-0 in the ACC, 2-0 with 2 ACC wins in this type of year. Carolina, Virginia Tech in Kenan Stadium, noon on Saturday. Maybe. We'll see what happens. Virginia Tech still having issues. Who knows what happens, but we'll be there to cover it. Inside Carolina will all week. You've got your daily podcast that'll come your way. From me, you'll get the On the Beat and the game plan with Jason Staples later in the week. Buck Sanders, always a pleasure. Jason Staples, always a pleasure.
Thanks. Appreciate it, Tommy.
Thanks, Tommy.
Yep. You've been listening to Inside Carolina podcast, sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt, johnnytshirt.com. Rate us, review us, subscribe, do all that stuff. We'll be around next time.